Teatro do Oprimido.
Well, now, the courage to be happy. 30 years ago, the internationally celebrated Brazilian director Augusto Boal developed a kind of dramatic technique which he calls theatre of the oppressed. Since then, he's toured the world, running workshops for a wide range of people, from landless peasants to members of the Royal Shakespeare Company. Last March, Ray Brown caught up with Augusto Boal in Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire, where Boal had been invited to run a workshop for a group of people with disabilities.
He was a tiny man, and he looked at me and said, "Augusto, what shall I do?" And I said, "I don't know, I'm not an actor." You improvise.
He's like a magic man, I think. He doesn't come as some sort of icon or some sort of idol. He comes and shares it with us and tells us to go and share it with other people.
He's just so peaceful, isn't he? His whole aura is one of peace and happiness. And that's why I find it hard to believe what he went through in prison and torture.
It was boom, cha, boom, cha, boom, cha.
It's early March in Hebden Bridge. A Brazilian sun pierces the rain-soaked, sagging quilt of Pennine cloud. For 26 disabled theatre workers, there's no question why the sky is turning blue. Augusto Boal is in town. He's a guest of a local group called Enabling Theatre, and he'll run a 3-day workshop just for them.
In Hebden Bridge, I worked with deaf people, blind people, sufferers from cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, multiple sclerosis and deep depression, all together within a single group.
The best way of doing theatre of oppressed is when people themselves do it, and they don't need me. There is theatre of oppressed, is the theatre that is inside people and not coming from the outside. So you, at least most of you I know, have already done theatre, and some of you have done theatre of oppressed. For instance, she has done theatre inside the council, the city council of Bradford. It was about a person, a mother that was sick, and then she had a baby. And then in the hospital, they took the baby away from her and would not allow her to stay with the baby because she was sick. And she wanted to have the right to say, okay, I'm sick, but I have a baby. I'm sick, but I'm a mother. And she had not that right, and then she had to give away the child. This was presented inside the city hall and in the presence of the mayor himself. And in this country, I believe that the mayors, when they come to the official event, they have to come with a chain. It was very impressive, this sort of chain. And there is attendants around him, you are like this. And they were there on the scene showing the problem and replacing the mother as protagonist and say what could she have done to avoid that. And above all, we were trying to to propose a law about that. And then the people who came in, other people stayed out to take notes of the interventions and to take note of the meaning of the intervention. How was this intervention meant what? So that they could prepare projects of law. And then to present those projects of law there, really, in that council, where the laws were being made throughout the year. So she had done that. Other people, I know from 12 years or so, I don't know, from there it was a long time ago.
It was in Ireland, 1983.
We've got this little film about you at Boal's workshop, and you're acting out your experience of becoming the Disability Arts Officer. Can you explain what the film is all about?
Yeah, I remember it. When I first started work at Calderdale, it was unfortunate because the person who'd been appointed as our line manager had actually left before we even started. I was doing a job share with somebody, and so there was no one that we could go to with queries, and there were certain people in the office who were supporting us to an extent, but there was no one person to take responsibility for what we were doing. And specifically with my access to work claim, because as you know I'm deaf, I wore hearing aids back then, and in some situations like meetings I needed interpreters, and I'd had access to work come in to assess me in my job, and we'd agreed a level of support for me, but then I couldn't find anybody to actually sign the forms to agree from it. There was nobody from the council, and I was just being passed from person to person.
So this scene which we're about to see is about you trying to get your access to work.
Yes, trying to get the forms signed so that I could access to work.
So when you get the form signed, what will you actually get in form of access to work?
There were things like an amplified telephone, so many hours per week interpreter time, so I could have interpreters in meetings. I think there was something like a pager that I could have in my pocket back then, which was linked to fire alarms in the building. So if I was in the office by myself and the fire alarm went off, I might not hear it, so the pager would go off in my pocket. So it's just basic equipment and some sign language support. It wasn't really a massively big deal, but I just needed somebody to take responsibility. But nobody really had any knowledge of processing the access to work applications. And
what I remember is that they had put you in an open plan office.
That's right, yeah.
And so you've got a deaf woman working in an open plan office surrounded by sound.
A lot of noise, it was very noisy.
And did you have any sign language interpreters?
Not in the office, no, just for specific meetings.
So then, when you said, oh dear, I can't work here, they moved you to an office on your own, up 3 flights of stairs.
That's right, yes.
And I visited you there once. 3
in a cupboard.
Oh.
So it was a storage room, yes.
And all they told me was that, oh well, you should just invite her to come down and have a meeting where? In an open. So it's sad to say that the concept of access to work, it's a great idea. I mean, it's excellent, but the reality.
I think, you see, it was the person who'd actually put together the funding application for this post of Disability Arts Officer, and I was doing that as a job share. They'd been the ones to make the application, but then they'd left to do another job. And so the rest of the people in the office weren't aware of the contents of the application. They weren't very clear on our role, and they just presumed we were there to develop work with disabled people, but they had no understanding that actually the culture of the office and of the council actually needed to change to make it more accessible for disabled people. And so it was a battle to kind of just get very basic changes made for the workers to have access, never mind the wider community to have access to museums and arts activities and whatever. So
And so they had appointed you, a deaf woman, as a disability arts officer, but you were in a job share with another woman. What was her disability?
she didn't have a disability.
So,
and we were very different in our approaches. She was looking at bringing in quite highly respected artists, but she was looking at able-bodied artists that could come and work with disabled people, whereas my approach was to empower disabled people to do the work themselves. And that's why when you sent me some information about your background, I was very keen to support you, because I wanted to see disabled people running their own projects and workshops, rather than, it's the difference between disability arts and arts and disability, if you're familiar with those terms. Yeah.
And so it was thanks to that inspiration that Enabling Theatre was born. And I, a disabled woman, led the workshops, and you set it up. And you'll remember that I was so ill at those times. I couldn't get from my house less than a mile to the workshop space in town. So I had to have care support, and you organised me to have care support to come to my house and collect me in a car and drive me there. And after a 2-hour workshop, I was on my knees. But we were all disabled. I mean, everybody who came to that workshop considered themselves in some way, anyway, to be disabled. And so it was this wonderful atmosphere of people sharing issues which disempower us in the society.
It was very positive, wasn't it? Yeah, that was one of the highlights of my work, I think, working with you, Susan, yes. Yes.
Well, thank you, and it's made a huge change to lots of our lives. I mean, as I think I told you, I've flown over to Africa running workshops with disabled Africans. Anne, who used to come to my workshops, her agoraphobia had kept her in the house that she was born in for 50 years in Halifax. She now lives on a houseboat outside Hebden Bridge. Another guy, Sadiro, the guy who was my sort of supporter and helper, he is dyslexic, but he wasn't even able to identify himself as being disabled. But in the time that he was with Enabling Theatre, he moved a whole huge miles in terms of his self-understanding and recognition and putting himself. I mean, when you've got something, it's very easy. Society sort of looks down on us and says, "Dear, you poor things," and it's very easy to just imbibe that yourself, isn't it?
I think disabled people, by their very nature, because if they've got mobility issues or communication problems, or they need additional support, can become very isolated, and so we're all living in our own little bubbles, just struggling through. But when you actually bring people together to share their experiences and start supporting each other, that can be really empowering, and that's how you instigate change, isn't it? Because it gives you a bigger voice as a group of people rather than as an individual. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course it does. And that's exactly what Boal's work did for us. We wanted to move Enabling Theatre beyond just Hebden Bridge, so we started by having a training programme for workshop leaders at Calder College, and we brought Julian Boal here, Augusto's son, to train a group of potential workshop leaders. Unfortunately, nothing went much further. But then we thought, how about radio? Because we were in connection with Vicky Richardson, who hosts a disabled radio programme at All FM in Manchester, and she had come to Augusto Boal's second training in Hebden Bridge. So we started to explore the possibilities of radio, of phone-in radio. But unfortunately we couldn't find an accessible radio station.
There was one in Halifax, but they weren't interested. And the closest one was all the way away in Newcastle. I was too far to go every week.
Hello there. We represent Enabling Radio. Enabling Radio was developed from Enabling Theatre way back in '99. This is Susan Quick. Susan was enabled and helped by Calderdale Disability Arts to start Enabling Theatre.
Yes, I couldn't have done it without Calderdale Disability Arts. They were absolutely wonderful. They organised everything for me. I've got a form of brain damage that is called head injury, which means I forget everything. Calderdale Disability Arts, they helped me run the workshops. They organised everything, and they sent somebody to my house to pick me up and to drive me. It was less than a mile, but I was so disabled at that point in my life that I couldn't even get on a bus and catch a bus less than a mile into the centre of Hebden Bridge. Anne, when she first came, she had chronic agoraphobia. A friend had to bring her on a bus, and she still lived in the house that she was born in 50 years ago. She sold the house and she now lives on a houseboat. In 2004, I led a performance at the European Social Forum in London. So these are the changes that I've seen, and this is why we are moving into radio.
Would you like to tell us what Enabling Radio does?
We use Augusto Boal's Theatre of the Oppressed to explore and seek solutions to issues which disable those of us who have some form of impairment.
So, are you saying that disability is a form of oppression?
In a way, yes. Look at the word disable. What does it mean? It means I can't do anything. I'm just defined as a person that doesn't function. And so, yes, it's a form of oppression. We believe it is, and we use Augusto Boal's Theatre of the Oppressed to invite people to say, how would they solve this problem that is oppressing one of us?
So you're saying they're trapped and disabled by society?
Yeah, and Augusto Boal, he came twice to Hebden Bridge to train us in the little theatre.
How many disabilities all of us have? You spoke about German. Yes, it's an oppression. I speak 4 or 5 languages, but the German I cannot understand. It's impossible for me to learn German, and I want to learn German. So I have some problem in my head that tells me don't learn German. But I cannot drive a car. That's also, I'm disabled for that. All my family drives, my children drive, everyone drives cars. I cannot swim. I love the water. But I'm so much afraid of swimming, I cannot swim. So I have my disabilities also, like everyone. Like everyone has disabilities. But the problem is not to have them. Is first accept that everyone is unique and also has disabilities. Everyone. No one is totally able to do everything. It's not possible.
Together, we use theatre to explore and seek solutions to issues which oppress us. And guess what? We won a nationwide award for voluntary endeavour, and we were invited to go to the Houses of Parliament to receive the prize. But, and this is the but, they had sent us the train tickets. There were 4 of us going down. Sid used the wheelchair. We didn't know, nobody had told us that you can't just get on a train with a wheelchair. You have to book the space in advance. There's only one space. And so we got to York Station. We tried to get on the train, and police came to stop us getting on.
So they arrested you then?
Well, they didn't actually arrest us. But the 2 police officers came, and they were a bit embarrassed, I think. And they said, sorry, we had to wait and catch the next train. We couldn't get this one.
It should have been a proud moment, a visit to the House of Commons to receive an award. But it became a day to remember for all the wrong reasons for 3 disabled travellers from Hebden Bridge. They were refused access to a GNER train because they hadn't booked in advance. When they were finally allowed on, one of them had to travel sitting next to the toilet. Kirsty Mitchell reports.
Train travel can be a tricky experience when you're a wheelchair user like Davis, but with some assistance and consideration, like that offered by this Arriva conductor, it needn't be. But it seems not all train operators are as helpful, and recently she and her friends were stopped in their tracks by GNER as they tried to board a train to London to receive a Disabled Achievement Award.
We asked, could we please just get on the train? We don't want anything else, we just want to travel to London. And we could see a ramp not very far away, actually on the platform. Please, could they just bring the ramp over? We could wheel the wheelchair on. No way, they refused. All they were telling us was how much we were costing them by delaying the departure of the train.
The result was a huge row. The police were called and they were threatened with a £150 fine, all because they'd failed to pre-book.
I didn't exist.
I can't believe what they were doing, the way they treated everyone, including myself, and the way the staff actually came out and spoke. You know, I wouldn't speak to a child the way they spoke to us.
At first, GNER offered a 5-day return ticket from Hebden Bridge to York as compensation. Then they increased their offer to travel vouchers worth £60 for each of them. They've apologised and have stressed they have an advance reservation system which ensures people with disabilities are looked after. They say they pride themselves on their customer service but admit they let the group down.
I know what you want, but you've not got any permission to get on this train right now because...
The group, who run a theatre, have now written a play experience. They've rejected GNER's compensation offer and have vowed to take the matter further.
With arrest at the station, and one guy, a guy who uses a wheelchair, he got out of his wheelchair and crawled onto the track. That's what I'd have done. I'd have blocked the train.
So, how does this work on radio?
That's a very good question. This has never been done on radio anywhere in the world before, so we will be an absolute first. So it's going to be quite experimental. We will perform the play and then we will ask listeners to phone in or send us an email and tell us what they would do if they were the protagonist, if it was their problem. And hopefully we'll get a lot of listeners phoning in who are brave enough to actually speak live on radio. We'll act the play again, and this time with a new person showing us how they would do it. In 2015, I learned that Yuri Neumayer was leading a 10-day Theatre of the Oppressed workshop hosted by Kadri Yaraks, the Dakar Theatre in Senegal. Wow. Time to go home to Africa. I'd lived and worked in Africa for more than 10 years before my accident. But unable to travel alone, somebody had to come with me. And so I took Enabling Theatre's chair, Anthony McGovern. He came to act for him. It was the first time to go to Africa. And while we were there, talking to Kadri Yaraks' president, Mahamadou Diol, I told him about Enabling Theatre, and he invited us to come and run. He'd got more than 20 disabled members of Kadri Yaraks, and he said, why didn't I come back and run workshops with them? Hey. And the Arts Council sponsored me. And so we went back twice, and the sponsorship included the purchase of a film. We initially thought we just needed to keep a record, but now we're moving Enabling Theatre into film. So what we are exploring now is whether this 21st century technology can actually bring Augusto Boal's Forum Theatre into film. How can we show a film and there's a point at which the protagonist is encountering an issue which is disabling them, and okay, the people in the film might show them alternative ways of remedying this, but how can we get the audience involved? This is what we are now looking at doing. Is there some way that members of the audience can somehow get on stage, climb into the film and do it their own way? Perhaps we show it in cinemas and stop the film regularly
and discuss alternatives with the audience as one possibility. So it's all in a very early exploratory stage right now.
C'est bien. Nous avons besoin de jeunes volontaires comme vous dans ce pays-là. Tu as fait des études? Oui. Qu'est-ce que tu as comme diplôme? Je suis maîtrisard en histoire géo. Ah, donc tu sais lire des cartes, toi, n'est-ce pas? Bien sûr. Ok, c'est bon. C'est-à-dire ceux qui fabriquent des chaussures, nos tenues militaires, etc. Tu comprends? Donc maintenant tu vas me remplir cette fiche dans la salle d'attente. Et là, tu me mets toutes tes informations, ton parcours, ok? Et de l'autre côté, ça, c'est moi qui signe, ok? Donc, tu le fais là en attendant que je reçoive d'autres personnes. Merci. Stop. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Quoi? Il n'y a rien.
Pose ton pied.
Je peux pas.
Mais pourquoi?
Parce que je peux pas.
Remets-moi ma fiche. Remets-moi ma fiche, j'ai dit. Tu penses que c'est le bordel ici? Vous pensez que nous sommes dans un centre social? C'est pas un service pour handicapés ici, ok?
Alors, qu'est-ce que vous pensez? Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose que celui-là qui a pu faire, ou même le colonel? Qu'est-ce que vous pensez? Vous avez des idées?
Parce qu'en fait, moi, ce n'est que maintenant. Parce que moi, je suis un ancien militaire. Je suis de la classe 88-2 et j'ai servi au bataillon de transmission et au Britannique militaire comme homme de troupe. Bon, oui. Et donc, ça, il y a tellement de métiers dans l'armée que n'importe qui peut faire. Quand je dis n'importe qui, c'est celui qui ne peut pas marcher, celui qui embrasse. Il y a tellement de métiers qui ne nécessitent pas l'endurance qu'on souhaite voir chez les militaires. Mais les textes...
léegi nag ñoom fii dañoo nekk ci bus comme ni ñu ko gisee léegi moom carte bi dañuy wax ni mën nañu yéeg ci bus bi te du fay léegi dañuy xool fii bu demee ci bus bi nan lay def ak chauffeur bi. chauffeur baa ngi noonu.
waaw lii lan la. non non da ngay fay de fii bus.
may fay. Mais mon frère, là, nous sommes expliqués. damay dégg wala damay doon. kaay toog ci biir bi. waaw kaay toog allez allez voilà. toogal ba pare ñu wax. yow jàpp leen rek. toogal. voilà. yàlla laa ko natt. mooy. fay moom dañu ne tant que fayal boobu la. man daal soo bëggee. ma jox alhamdulilah ndax kan moom war a woon moom.
sëñ bi xanaa gisoo carte bi ma yore gisoo carte bii ma yore kii mooy carte d'égalité des chances.
kii moo la wane léegi may ko da ngay fay di doo fa dëgg.
wala fu ne ni ñàkk a xam dëgg suwoo loolaa nga leen indi carte bi moom mooy carte bi nga xamante ne.
ñoom lañ la yoreloo ci xaalis nguur gi dala koy fay.
non le gouvernement ne va pas rembourser parce qu'on n'a pas encore les moyens de faire de rembourser. On n'a pas encore les moyens.
Ah, bonjour. Ok, nous avons maintenant un petit problème, n'est-ce pas? Je crois qu'on va faire le même scène, mais maintenant, ce serait le bus. Notre chauffeur, vous allez vendre votre bus et vous allez être le chauffeur avec une bus d'État, n'est-ce pas? Ça va?
Ça va.
Bon, d'accord.
Oui. Ça va, ça va. Comptez alors, santé à l'eau. Il y a des samalopans là. Il y a des samalopans. C'est quoi? 4 heures là. Donc, c'est un état de chance. Voilà, les c'est bon.
Alors, est-ce qu'il y a entre vous quelqu'un qui veut essayer de monter ce bus-là?
Allez.
damay taxaw di xaar bis bi ñëwagul sama taxawaay yàgg na boo ma fu ma toog damay essayer sukk su ma yorul chaise roulante dafa lay nekk di jàppandu borom bis bi mën naa yàggam waaye gaaw a jënd waaye bu avancé te fekk bu góob bu baax damay daal. ndax bu mu ëpp doole man moom ngay ànd daanu kon lu ñuy jàpp Merci. Ok.
Je vous félicite. Vous et toute l'équipe, je vous remercie et je vous félicite. Mais je félicite et je remercie également tous nos autres, le chef de délégation, Michel Diaw, avec tout le monde, mais également nos partenaires étrangers, Suzanne et Tony. Inch'Allah, je pense que yàlla dinañu may Inch'Allah une délégation sénégalaise dina mën a ñëw jóge fii ñëw seet si leen en Europe ba li ngeen di wax ñu gis ko te Inch'Allah bu ngeen ci taxawee Inch'Allah yàlla ci doomu mu jàng.
Let's meet two disabled lovers in England. They're being taken out by their carers and they meet in the park.
Do you need anything else? No, that's it, isn't it? Park's a quick look park now. Hello, how are you?
Hiya.
Oh, you won't believe the sparkling top I got.
How was it?
Not too bad.
What?
That'd be cute, eh?
Oh.
They do look each other.
Are you wearing your green on Saturday night?
No, the sparkling top looks lovely.
Yeah. Hey, don't touch him now. Don't be doing that. That's enough now.
That's enough now.
No, don't touch him.
Oh, it's been terrible all day.
Honestly. I think we better stop.
It's been awful all day, you know.
I know, it's just...
What is the maximum with you, eh?
You don't want this stuff.
I thought we'd come in the park, have a nice ice cream, but no, you've got to spoil it, haven't you, eh? Right, come on then, off we go. We're going to have to go back now.
Okay, we're getting ice cream. Don't worry about it. We won't go there again to see that. Okay, here's nice ice cream. What do you want to do? You go.
There's no want about it. We have to
If
go
you
back.
do that sort of thing, you're not going to get taken out again. Now just behave yourself. See?
I was invited to Senegal to lead workshops with disabled members of Arte Theatre Company.
Donc salaamaaleykum mbokk yi tey comme ni ngeen ko gisee dañu leen indil benn histoire boo xamante ni mu ngi wax ci ñaari xale yu bëggante ku ne ci ñoom nag am na jafe-jafe waaye ñu xool loolu naka la ñu ko indilee bismillah.
On my second visit to Senegal, Enabling Theatre Senegal was born.
Yéen waa Caaru yéen nu de kontaan nañ ci yéen xanaa di leen delloo njukkal di leen wax yéen jaaraama yal na Yàlla dundal yal na Yàlla barkeen njaboot gi képp ku fi ñëw bi la.
People from the audience were invited to come up on stage and perform issues about disability. It wasn't rehearsed, they just came and did it their own way. And so 2 women came up and said they were going to be co-wives, the wives of the same husband, which is perfectly okay in Senegal. One of the members of Enabling Theatre Senegal was the disabled son of one of the wives, and another member of Enabling Theatre Senegal was the husband of both of the wives.
All is cold as the sea when my friends gather round. Oh my farewell, Polly, won't you pretend you love me?
Kii daal moom bay ak doom la te nu ñu longo wi mu neex ma lool. Kii daal bay ak doom la nu ñu longo mu neex ma lool. ñu daal di dox daje Yàlla moo ñu boole. ñu daal di dox daje Laaw moo ñu boole. kon ni rekk lay mun a demee fii ci àdduna. Papa Tony wayal wayal yee Papa Tony wayal wayal wayal. Ki daal bay ak doom la ñoom ñu longo waaye ki daal bay ak doom la ñoom ñu longo waaye Yàlla moo ñu boole ci ndox mi Yàlla moo ñu boole ci jaww ji.
What I have learnt from Augusta has guided me in the creation of Enabling Theatre. We've got 2.5 months footage of 80 disabled people with a range of impairments, and our goal is to compare issues across cultures, bring the oppression of being classified as disabled to the general public, of which, as the title 104 of the Sheffield-based English disabled film producer company announces, we are 1 in 4 of the global population. We demand acceptance and full inclusion.